Welcome to another edition of ERAtv, where we have a little fun with the movers and shakers in the DR business. I'm Craig Burnett, and with me is Jeff Knowles from Venable. Jeffrey, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Craig.
May I call you Jeff, or do you prefer
Call
Jeffrey?
me Jeff.
All right, that's a good thing. So the first question I have for you is, what's it like being a lawyer? Do you ever get tired of being at the dinner parties and having people coming up and saying, do I have a case?
I never get tired of that as a lawyer, but I don't function just as a lawyer. In this business, you're product promoter, company promoter, so everybody wants to know if they can get free products from this industry. So nobody's asking me about whether they can win that case or not. They all want a free Snuggie or Proactive Solution or some other product.
Of course, and you have them in the trunk of your car, I'm guessing.
Absolutely,
right?
I keep them in the trunk, I keep them in my desk drawer.
It's a good way to make a little money on the side if the law business is ever going downhill. So this has been a year of huge legal issues for the direct response industry. Do you think it's been the busiest year since you've been in the industry?
Well, this has certainly been one of the busiest years ever. You know, when ERA was founded back in 1990, it was based around congressional hearings in Washington, and that was the catalyst for forming the association. And so there were a lot of concerns at that time. This past year, we've had legislative hearings in Congress. Senator Rockefeller, and he's the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, have been very interested in online marketing, and particularly online negative option marketing. So this has been a really busy year for the industry and for government affairs generally.
Does it seem odd? I mean, I've been connected with this industry for 30 years, and it seems odd to me that you would go to Washington and sit in a room full of congressmen and senators talking about television commercials. Do they really belong in this industry, or is there really something to what they're talking about?
Well, there is something to what they're talking about, because the companies in the direct response industry touch millions and millions of consumers across the country. And if consumers have a complaint about either the products they're receiving or about the way in which their credit cards are being charged, or whether they can cancel programs or get refunds, then that becomes an issue for Congress, for the Federal Trade Commission. And Congress has to reauthorize the FTC every year, so it becomes a big issue. And so yes, absolutely, Congress does have a role as a watchdog, as well as the Federal Trade Commission. So Washington, in a sense, is driving the advertising industry and driving the direct response industry this year more than ever. So it's an important issue.
Yeah. Now, have the success of shows like Pitchman and Shark Tank shining the light on the industry, has that been a help or a hindrance to the way that many of these rapscallions out there are treating the public? Are they starting to back off and be less nefarious, or are we always going to have those people out there?
I think there's always going to be a fringe element. There's always going to be a rotten apple in the barrel, but I think ERA and the industry have done a good job in terms of self-regulation, in terms of supporting reasonable regulation that's aimed at protecting consumers, but also helping commerce. So I think ERA struck a good balance. But I think there are always going to be some lawbreakers, always some companies that are going to try to bend the rules or break the rules altogether. I think it's part and parcel of just advertising and marketing generally.
Sure. Now, some of the things that I've had problems with the FTC or with some of the other government agencies in the past is nobody ever told us this is right and this is wrong. 18-point type is okay, but 17-point type is not okay. And a 5-second disclaimer is okay, but nobody ever said this is what it needs to be. I read some regulations last year at the show, and they're regulations, but they seem awfully ambiguous. Like, well, it may be okay, it may not be okay. It kind of depends on what your intention is. Is it really good enough for advertisers and show producers to have good intentions? I mean, don't we need these restrictions to work inside of?
Well, that's why they're lawyers, because the regulations are ambiguous enough and not specific enough in many cases to tell people exactly what to do, or more importantly, what not to do. And so that's where lawyers like me come in, and that's why we have a very active role in the industry. At the same time, I would say the regulation in this area is more of an art than a science. In many cases, there are judgment calls that marketers have to make about how they comply with the regulations, what types of disclaimers they put up on screen, what the overall net impression of the advertisement means. So there's a lot of ambiguity, and there is not a bright line. There are a few areas of regulation that the FTC looks over that are black and white, clear as day, but a lot of the areas really are subject to interpretation, and there's sort of a gray zone. And so a lot of marketers want to push right up to the line, but not over. Right. But it's not easy necessarily to do. So there is confusion, and that's where I often get to play a key role.
Has there ever been a time when you made the judgment call and maybe weren't exactly right?
Rarely. Rarely. What we find, I would say, and without trying to sound arrogant,
sure,
I would say 99% of the time, close to that, we're right. The difficulty is often clients don't want to follow all of the advice. They'll follow some of it, but not all. And sometimes that'll get them into trouble. But generally, we have a pretty good feel where that line is, where the gray areas are. So we can tell people generally how to get up to the line, but not to go over it. But there is it's a science. It's an art. It's not a science.
Yeah. So these days, probably more than ever, you would say that it's more important than ever for advertisers in this industry specifically to go ahead and check with Venable or another competent firm that can help them navigate through those waters, rather than just kind of saying, well, we'll be okay, we'll just wait for the cease and desist.
There are a lot of rocks and dangerous shoals out there, and I think any marketer, whether it's through television or any form of direct response, really would be well advised to seek legal counsel before they launch a campaign. And if there are questions that come up or there are consumer complaints that they're getting, it makes good sense to check with counsel, because that kind of advice is really critical to being successful, particularly over the long term.
Excellent. Now, before we go, yesterday I had Forbes Riley on the show, and she was showing me the spin gym. She got a little close, and she hit me in the head with the spin gym. Do I have a case?
I think you could be. The first question I'd ask you, Craig, did you have witnesses?
No witnesses.
All right. Well, do you have a good lawyer?
Can I buy you a beer?
Maybe for a couple of beers we can talk about it.
Perfect.
I can certainly find a way to help you.
All right, Jeff, thanks very much for joining us today. Thank you for watching ERAtv. I'm Craig Burnett. We'll see you next time.